I'd suggest that Thunderbolts, or at least an alternative version of it, is the movie that should have been released after Endgame, say in 2020 or 2021. I'll try and lay this out as clearly as possible. Let me know if you think it makes sense. First, the downbeat tone. I really like the approach they take with the characters at the start of the movie. I don't particularly care about the stunt where Yelena throws herself off a really tall building, but rather the general sense of tiredness, burnout, how the characters are in the grip of an existential crisis. She gets up in the morning, she goes to work, she gets the job done, she goes home. The next day is very similar. She can't see the point of carrying on. This is a movie about depression and trauma. Much has been made of this aspect in the reviews, mostly negatively, and it's like nobody remembers watching Logan. We had Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart playing characters who were reduced to dire circumstances, driven by their pain. That movie came out to pretty much universal acclaim, so a downbeat tone can definitely work for a superhero movie. Don't let Zack Snyder hear me say that. Wouldn't this have been a great approach to take for the characters left behind after Endgame? They're grieving and they're insecure about stepping into the shoes of the legends like Iron Man, Captain America and Black Widow. Imagine, if you will, that in this 2020 version of Thunderbolts, you could keep Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. The new Black Widow, Florence Pugh, she's not the worst person to spend 2 hours looking at, let's keep her as well. Why not keep Red Guardian? Assuming the Black Widow movie has come out already. Assume for the purpose of this thought experiment that Black Widow came out in the slot that Captain Marvel occupied in real life just before Endgame. Now imagine the cast of 2020 Thunderbolts includes Hawkeye as well as Yelena. Imagine Sam Wilson is there as well. That movie could have had real emotional weight, could have genuinely felt like passing the torch to a new generation, acknowledging what was lost. And then, after this Thunderbolts 2020, the characters go on to their own movies, streaming shows, whatever, before eventually coming back together for Doomsday or Secret Wars or whatever team-up movie comes next. Instead, we got Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Great decision. So that's my fantasy version of Thunderbolts, the one I think would have been an amazing movie. The actual movie, there's plenty to like. The downbeat nature, the existential crisis, like I say, is one of the best things. And the characters that are allowed to lean into that are probably the ones best served by the script. Specifically, Yelena, the Red Guardian, and bargain bin Captain America. That's honestly a bit cruel, I think, John Walker. You could definitely make the argument that John Walker gets deconstructed. We see why he's awful and why he's wrong, but overall, I think it makes me more sympathetic for the character rather than less. Louis Pullman as Bob, as the superhero Sentry, also puts in a decent performance. Bob is clearly going to be in later movies, and he gets just enough to do that I personally was left wanting to see more. I also thought David Harbour as the Red Guardian was particularly good. It seems like he's having the most fun out of everyone there. While you could argue that it leans into Russian stereotypes a bit, it doesn't feel mean. It feels like a needed contrast to some of the gloom. Overall, I'd say Thunderbolts, on balance, probably my favourite post-Endgame movie, and obviously I have to hugely caveat that that's probably the lowest bar ever. To say it's my favourite post-Endgame movie, I'm kind of conveniently ignoring No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine, because they're sort of novelty movies doing something that doesn't have much of a future by themselves. As much as I enjoyed many aspects of the movie, there's definitely that generic MCU 2020s slop feeling. The same tiredness that is one of the positives also permeates the bad decisions. Take the casting, for example. Yes, much of it is good, but looked at as a whole, the characters chosen give this sense of being out of ideas, like Disney searched around for which actors are still under contract and threw them together into this movie. Do you remember, for example, Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp? Do you remember Ant-Man and the Wasp? Right? And Ghost? Right? Well, Ghost is back in this movie, and what we discover about her character is, well, nothing. She just takes up some space on the screen, some space on the posters in the marketing. So apparently the woman of colour just exists to tick the box, and Disney doesn't seem to be doing very well at actually developing her character. And then there's Taskmaster, right? You remember Taskmaster from Black Widow, right? I really didn't, to be honest. I had to go and look her up afterwards. And there's also Julia Louis Dreyfus as Valentina, who just seems miscast as the antagonist. She's great at comedy. I love Seinfeld, but I don't think she's ever really had a dramatic role of any note, and here I think we see why. Somebody like Angela Bassett, for example, could have been much more interesting in this role. In the scene where most of these characters are brought together, it's not exciting, it's more like I was spending time going, who's that? I know that face. Which movie were they in? There's definitely the vibe of consume product, release date must be filled with product. This huge sense of meh. It's like going to the reunion of that band that you loved in the 80s. As much as you might like hearing the same songs, everyone is decades older and no one knows how to hit the high notes. In terms of plot, it works fine. It seems pretty streamlined, but the worst thing is probably the final fight with the baddie. It's basically exactly the same ending as Captain America Brave New World. We have the hero, we have the antagonist. The hero asks the antagonist to stop being a naughty boy. The antagonist stops being a naughty boy. The MCU is so out of creative ideas, they can't even find a way to create an engaging final confrontation. The special effects in this sequence, I think, look really good, but when you consider that a Mission Impossible movie will have 4 or 5 huge action sequences, each of them high quality, saying, hey, bad guy, just stop it, isn't really good enough in modern cinema. I get that there's a commercial imperative to do stuff as fast as possible, to fill release slots, but when Disney's creative decision-making, Thunderbolts to Fantastic Four, jumping straight into Doomsday, none of it seems to really be working as yet. Is there not anyone at Disney, at Marvel, who's looking around and saying, hey, things aren't going so well, what can we do differently? Despite the many positives, this sense of desperation feels palpable on the screen. Personally, I hated the New Avengers rebranding. It feels incredibly forced. We're supposed to clap like seals, supposed to lap this up like, oh wow, they're so cool, oh my god, I'm so excited for next product. In the final post-credit scene, we find out that Sam Wilson is starting his own Avengers team, copywriting the name. And I guess at this point, where in-universe superheroes are copywriting things, this is where you insert the meme of Robert Downey Jr. rolling his eyes so hard they're practically falling out of his head. For another of Disney's wet farts that periodically ripple through cinemas. Compare this desperate New Avengers setup to the slow burn efforts of Phase 1. Just make a bunch of good movies, then slowly bring those characters together over a few years. The MCU is starting to give the vibe that DC had when it rushed out the Justice League in the mid-2010s. And the Justice League, the Snyderverse, the wider audience didn't react well to those movies. And that similar vibe, DC in the mid-2010s, Marvel in the mid-2020s, is reflected in the box office. Thunderbolts is financially doing worse than Captain America Brave New World, worse than Ant-Man 3. And look at the top line there, that's Thor Ragnarok from 2017, which went for a somewhat similar quirky vibe and was way more financially successful. And the end credit scene reminds you that movies from bigger characters are coming up soon, which makes Thunderbolts feel a little irrelevant, which I feel bad about saying because there's some really interesting ideas in there. So maybe I'll give it a rewatch sometime down the road. Thanks for watching.